Take that off. The words cracked through courtroom 3 like a rifle shot. Every conversation stopped. Judge Harold Whitmore leaned forward over the polished oak bench, his expression unreadable as he pointed toward the black braided bracelet wrapped around the left wrist of the woman seated at the witness stand. I won't repeat myself, Commander Bennett. 43-year-old Sarah Bennett didn't flinch. The faded black paracord bracelet looked ordinary, frayed from years of wear, its metal clasp scratched and dull from salt water, sand, and time. She rested her hand calmly on the witness rail. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Her voice was respectful. But I can't. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Several reporters immediately looked up from their laptops. The federal prosecutor stopped organizing documents. Even the jury exchanged uncertain glances. Judge Whitmore frowned. Every witness entering this courtroom must remove items that may distract proceedings. Sarah nodded. I understand. Then remove it. A long silence settled over the room. Finally she answered, I can't do that. The courtroom had gathered to hear testimony in one of the largest defense procurement fraud cases in recent history. Millions of dollars. Military cybersecurity contracts. Classified communication systems. Executives. Lobbyists. Government officials. Everyone expected technical testimony. No one expected the first battle to involve a simple bracelet. Victor Langford, CEO of Aegis Strategic Systems, watched from the defense table. His expensive suit couldn't hide the confidence on his face. He leaned toward one of his attorneys. She's making herself look difficult. The attorney smiled. Let her. Judge Whitmore's patience was beginning to wear thin. Commander Bennett. It's Sarah now, Your Honor. You retired? 8 years ago. Very well. He folded his hands. Ms. Bennett. She looked directly at him. Are you refusing a lawful order from this court? No. Then explain your refusal. Sarah hesitated. Not because she didn't know the answer. Because she had promised herself she would never tell it unless there was absolutely no other choice. I gave my word. The judge raised an eyebrow. To whom? She looked down at the bracelet. People who can't answer anymore. High above the courtroom, 15-year-old Ethan Bennett shifted uneasily in the public gallery. He had skipped school for the hearing. His mother insisted it would be routine. Instead, she appeared to be arguing with a federal judge. His face burned with embarrassment. Why won't she just take it off? It was only a bracelet. She'd worn it every day since he could remember. He'd asked about it dozens of times. She always smiled. Just an old promise. Nothing more. Nothing less. Judge Whitmore sighed. This court respects military service. He spoke carefully. But courtroom rules apply equally to everyone. Sarah nodded. I understand. Then remove it. Again. I can't. The judge looked toward the court security officers. Mr. Collins. One officer stepped forward. If the witness refuses. He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what came next. Contempt. Removal. Possibly arrest. The officer approached slowly. He wasn't aggressive. He simply extended one hand. Ma'am. Sarah looked at him kindly. I don't want to make your job harder. Then please. She slowly stood. I won't resist. The officer reached toward the bracelet. From the back row of the gallery, a chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. Every head turned. An elderly man in a perfectly pressed Navy service uniform rose to his feet. 4 silver stars gleamed across each shoulder. The courtroom recognized him immediately. Retired Admiral Jonathan Reeves. He had attended only as an observer after being subpoenaed regarding procurement oversight. Until that moment, he had remained silent. Now his eyes were locked on Sarah's wrist, not on her face, not on the bracelet itself, on the tiny engraving visible beneath the worn clasp. His expression changed instantly. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. Then something deeper. Grief. He took one slow step forward. Another. The courtroom watched without understanding. The officer paused. The judge frowned. Admiral. The old sailor never looked away from Sarah. Instead, he spoke one quiet word. Ghost. Sarah's head lifted sharply. Only 4 people had ever called her that outside classified operations. 3 were dead. She stared at the Admiral. I haven't heard that name. She swallowed. In 15 years. The Admiral's voice trembled. I never thought I'd hear it again. The courtroom had no idea what was happening. Reporters immediately stopped typing. Cameras turned. Even Victor Langford's confident smile disappeared. His attorney whispered, Do you know what's happening? Langford didn't answer. His eyes had gone pale. Judge Whitmore struck the gavel. Order. No one moved. The Admiral slowly walked toward the witness stand. Every step echoed across the silent courtroom. When he reached Sarah, he stopped, looked at the faded bracelet one last time. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the retired 4-star Admiral came to full military attention and rendered a perfect salute. Gasps echoed throughout the gallery. Veterans sitting among the spectators instinctively stood. Several quietly returned the salute. Sarah hesitated only a moment before returning it. No words. Just 2 veterans honoring something no one else in the room could see. Judge Whitmore lowered his gavel. For the first time in nearly 30 years on the federal bench, he had absolutely no idea what to do next. The Admiral finally broke the silence. Your Honor. His voice was steady now. If that bracelet bears the call sign, I believe it does. He looked around the courtroom. Then today's hearing is about to become far more important than anyone realizes. The room fell into complete silence. Victor Langford slowly reached beneath the defense table for his phone. Before he could unlock it, an NCIS agent quietly stepped beside him. Sir. Langford looked up. Yes. The agent held out his hand. I'm going to need your phone. Langford forced a smile. On what grounds? The agent's expression never changed. Because someone just mentioned a call sign connected to a classified operation that was never supposed to enter a public courtroom. He paused. And judging by your reaction, he looked directly into Langford's eyes. I think you already knew that. The courtroom remained frozen. No one spoke. No one even reached for a pen. The only sound was the soft hum of the courtroom air conditioner and the rain tapping against the tall windows overlooking downtown Norfolk. Judge Harold Whitmore slowly lowered his reading glasses. He had presided over terrorism cases, organized crime trials, and espionage hearings. He had never seen a retired 4-star admiral interrupt proceedings to salute an ordinary witness, especially not one who moments earlier had been one step away from contempt of court. He looked directly at Admiral Jonathan Reeves. Admiral. His voice remained calm. Would you explain to this court exactly what's happening? The Admiral didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept his eyes on Sarah Bennett. Commander. Sarah gave a small smile. I haven't been Commander Bennett for a long time. You'll always be Commander Bennett to me. Sarah looked genuinely confused. Sir. She hesitated. I don't believe we've ever met. The Admiral nodded. We haven't. But I know exactly who Ghost was. Across the defense table, Victor Langford felt his heartbeat accelerate. His attorney leaned closer. Should we ask for recess? Langford kept his eyes fixed on Sarah. No. You don't look well. I said no. His hand disappeared beneath the table again. This time, he wasn't reaching for his phone. He was reaching for the small, encrypted panic transmitter clipped beneath the tabletop. One silent press. No light. No sound. Just a signal. Somewhere outside the courthouse, someone else's phone vibrated. NCIS Special Agent Marcus Hale noticed the movement immediately. He had spent years studying body language. People lied with words. They confessed with their hands. Without taking his eyes off Langford, Marcus quietly spoke into the microphone hidden beneath his jacket. Secondary target just transmitted. A voice answered through his earpiece. Confirmed. Track all outgoing signals. Judge Whitmore struck the gavel once. This court will remain in session. He looked toward Admiral Reeves. You appear to know something relevant. I do. Then please explain. The Admiral walked toward the witness stand. He stopped only a few feet from Sarah. His eyes dropped to the black bracelet wrapped around her wrist. You still wear it. Sarah instinctively covered it with her other hand. I promised. So you never took it off? No. Not once. She quietly shook her head. No. The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was unmistakable emotion behind them. I prayed that one day I'd find the person who wore that bracelet. Every reporter in the courtroom started typing again. Nobody knew what the bracelet meant, but everyone understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. Ethan sat completely still in the gallery. He stared at his mother. Who is she? He suddenly realized how little he knew. She never displayed medals, never attended veterans events, never talked about deployments. Whenever someone thanked her for serving, she always answered the same way. I was just doing my job. Now. A four-star admiral looked at her as though she were part of naval history. Rachel Kim, the assistant U.S. attorney, leaned toward Judge Whitmore. Your Honor. Yes. I believe we may need to seal portions of today's testimony. Based on what? She glanced toward the Admiral. I'm beginning to suspect this case overlaps classified military operations. The judge slowly nodded. So am I. Admiral Reeves finally looked away from Sarah. He faced the bench. Your Honor. I respectfully request permission to ask the witness one question. Judge Whitmore considered it. Proceed. The Admiral turned back toward Sarah. What was your extraction point? The courtroom looked confused. Sarah answered without hesitation. Delta Ice. The Admiral's breathing stopped for just a second. And the emergency frequency? 8.31. What was the weather? Whiteout. Visibility? Less than 20 feet. Mission duration? She answered instantly. 31 hours. The Admiral nodded slowly. Every answer had come without hesitation, without thinking. Memory. Not rehearsal. Victor Langford suddenly stood. Objection. The courtroom jumped. This line of questioning has absolutely nothing to do with defense procurement. Rachel Kim stood immediately. It may have everything to do with procurement. Judge Whitmore looked between them. Explain. Rachel picked up one of the exhibits already entered into evidence. The fraud investigation centers around communication systems sold to the Navy. She looked toward Sarah. If those systems were involved in, she turned toward Langford. Their performance becomes directly relevant. Langford's jaw tightened. The judge nodded. Objection overruled. The Admiral asked one final question. When the mission failed, Sarah interrupted quietly. It didn't fail. Silence. It cost lives. She nodded. Yes. But it didn't fail. The Admiral looked at her with unmistakable respect. Exactly. Marcus Hale quietly left the courtroom. His phone buzzed. Digital surveillance had already traced Langford's panic signal. Destination: a private data center less than 4 miles away. Marcus frowned. He's trying to erase something. Outside, federal agents accelerated toward the warehouse district. If Langford had activated an emergency protocol, evidence was already disappearing. Inside the courtroom, Judge Whitmore folded his hands. Commander Bennett. Sarah smiled faintly. Again. Ms. Bennett. He corrected himself. I have to ask. She nodded. Why wouldn't you remove the bracelet? Sarah looked around the room, then toward Ethan. She had spent 15 years making sure her son never carried the weight of her past. Now, there was no avoiding it. She slowly held up her wrist. This isn't jewelry. The courtroom leaned forward. It never was. Judge Whitmore asked gently, Then what is it? Sarah's fingers brushed the worn paracord. It is the last promise I ever made to 3 people who trusted me. The room became completely silent. And until I know that promise has been kept. She looked down at the bracelet. It doesn't leave my wrist. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen that bracelet every day of his life. While eating breakfast, helping with homework, watching movies, teaching him to drive. He had never once imagined it carried something so important. Back at the defense table, Victor Langford no longer looked confident. Sweat formed along his forehead. One of his attorneys whispered, Are you all right? Langford forced himself to nod. But inside, panic was growing. Because only 6 people had known the significance of the Callsign ghost. 3 were dead. 1 had disappeared. 1 had become an admiral. And the last was sitting only 20 feet away, alive, speaking under oath. At that exact moment, Marcus Hale's phone rang. He answered immediately. Tell me. The voice on the other end spoke rapidly. We reached the warehouse. And there was a fire. Marcus closed his eyes. No survivors. It was empty. The servers. Gone. A pause. Someone beat us here. Marcus looked back toward the courtroom doors. Langford had planned this. Not today. Years ago. Destroying evidence wasn't a reaction. It was a contingency. Marcus hurried back inside. He leaned toward Rachel Kim and whispered only one sentence. The archive has been wiped. Rachel's face fell. Everything. Marcus nodded. So it appears. Sarah overheard the exchange. She closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she looked toward the judge. They're too late. Judge Whitmore frowned. What do you mean? Sarah slowly reached into the folder she had brought to court. From inside, she removed a small, weathered military notebook with faded waterproof pages. She laid it gently on the witness stand. I stopped trusting computers a very long time ago. The courtroom stared. This. She rested her hand on the notebook. Is the original field journal from the Arctic operation. Even Admiral Reeves looked stunned. You kept it? Sarah nodded. I kept everything. Across the room, Victor Langford's face turned completely white. No one in the courtroom looked away from the small waterproof notebook resting on the witness stand. It wasn't much to look at. The cover was faded. The corners were bent. Salt stains had bleached parts of the black fabric gray. A strip of silver duct tape held the spine together. It looked like something that should have been thrown away years ago. Instead, Victor Langford stared at it as though it were a loaded weapon. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Ms. Bennett. Sarah rested one hand on the notebook. What exactly is that? My field journal. You kept operational notes? not classified mission plans. She carefully opened the first page. I kept something more important. The judge frowned. What? The truth. Across the defense table, Langford suddenly stood. Objection. Judge Whitmore looked irritated. On what grounds? We have no way of verifying the authenticity of that notebook. Sarah calmly answered before the judge could. You can. Everyone turned toward her. The paper was issued by Naval Special Warfare. She flipped to another page. The ink contains embedded authentication dye. Another page. Every entry is time-stamped. She looked directly at Langford, and every page was witnessed. Langford swallowed. Witnessed by whom? Sarah slowly closed the notebook. 3 people who never came home. The courtroom fell silent again. Ethan had never seen his mother like this. At home, she laughed at terrible cooking shows. She forgot where she left her glasses. She always lost the TV remote. The woman sitting in the witness chair spoke with absolute certainty. Every answer was precise, measured, controlled. It felt as though someone had quietly switched places with the mother he knew. Judge Whitmore addressed the clerk. Mark the notebook as Exhibit 21. The clerk carefully accepted it. Even she handled it gently, almost respectfully. NCIS Agent Marcus Hale stepped forward. Your Honor. Yes, Agent Hale. My team has completed preliminary authentication. So quickly. Marcus nodded. The notebook matches equipment issued exclusively to Naval Special Warfare Intelligence between 2009 and 2012. He looked toward Sarah. So far. He paused. Everything she said checks out. Rachel Kim carefully opened the notebook. Each page contained handwritten observations, coordinates, weather conditions, equipment failures, communications logs. There were no dramatic speeches, no emotional entries, only facts. Professional. Precise. Until the final pages. Rachel stopped reading. Her voice softened. Your Honor. Judge Whitmore noticed the change immediately. What is it? Rachel slowly looked up. The handwriting changes. Sarah nodded. It does. Why? Because. Sarah looked down. My dominant hand was shattered. The room grew quiet. I had to finish writing with my left. Admiral Reeves closed his eyes. He remembered the report. Multiple fractures. Hypothermia. Blood loss. The official summary had never mentioned how badly Ghost had been injured, only that the operator completed the extraction. Now, he understood the cost. Rachel turned another page. There, in the middle of otherwise perfect operational notes, one sentence had been written in noticeably uneven handwriting. If anyone finds this, tell their families they never quit. Rachel stopped reading. No one spoke. Judge Whitmore broke the silence. Who wrote that? Sarah answered quietly. I did. Were you expecting not to survive? Sarah smiled faintly. I wasn't expecting anything. Victor Langford interrupted again. Your Honor, this is becoming emotional theater. Judge Whitmore's eyes narrowed. You object to a witness explaining evidence. I object to irrelevant military history. Rachel immediately stood. It became relevant the moment someone attempted to destroy evidence connected to this mission. She turned toward Langford. And oddly enough, she smiled slightly. The only person who seemed nervous before that happened was your client. Langford's attorney whispered frantically. Stop reacting. Victor didn't answer. Because he knew something no one else did. The notebook wasn't dangerous because of what Sarah remembered. It was dangerous because of one particular page. A page he prayed no longer existed. Sarah slowly turned to the center of the notebook. A folded map slipped onto the witness stand. Marcus picked it up carefully. Old satellite imagery, navigation marks, emergency extraction routes. Nothing unusual, until he noticed several handwritten circles. What are these? Sarah looked at the map. Communication relay sites. Rachel frowned. The same relay systems supplied by Aegis Strategic Systems? Sarah nodded once. Yes. Marcus immediately understood. If those systems failed, they did. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Rachel asked carefully, "How badly?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward Ethan. For years she had protected him from these memories. Now, there was no way around them. When the relay network failed, she spoke calmly. Our team lost contact with command. Marcus looked at the map. For how long? Almost 11 hours. Gasps echoed through the gallery. 11 hours. During a classified operation. Without communication. Rachel looked toward Langford. Your company certified those systems mission-ready. Langford finally spoke. I wasn't CEO then. No. Rachel agreed. But your signature appears on the modernization reports filed afterward. Langford said nothing. Judge Whitmore looked toward Sarah. What happened during those 11 hours? Sarah remained silent. The Admiral quietly answered instead. They disappeared. Everyone looked at him. The rescue team simply vanished. He looked toward the judge. For nearly half a day, the Navy believed every operator was dead. Even Ethan felt chills. Dead. His mother had never mentioned any of this. Not once. Rachel carefully unfolded another document tucked inside the notebook. Unlike the handwritten pages, this one was typed. Official. Stamped. She frowned. This doesn't belong here. Sarah nodded. I know. What is it? I found it after the mission. Rachel examined the heading. Equipment Reliability Assessment. Prepared by. She stopped reading. Aegis Strategic Systems. Victor Langford looked away. Marcus stepped closer. Continue. Rachel flipped to the second page. Then the third. Suddenly her expression changed. What? She slowly looked up. This report. She turned toward the judge. Was rewritten. Judge Whitmore frowned. What do you mean? Rachel held up the document beside a certified copy already entered into evidence. The wording is different. Marcus took both copies. Compared them. Every technical specification matched. Except one paragraph. The original Sarah carried stated. Relay instability observed during Arctic stress testing. Additional field validation required before operational deployment. The version filed with the Navy read. All relay systems successfully passed operational testing. Marcus looked toward Langford. Someone hadn't merely hidden evidence. Someone had altered history. The courtroom doors suddenly opened. A young NCIS forensic analyst hurried inside carrying a sealed evidence case. Agent Hale. Marcus turned. What is it? We recovered something. I thought the servers were destroyed. They were. She placed a hard drive on the evidence table. This wasn't. Where did you find it? She smiled. Inside the backup generator. Marcus blinked. The generator? The technician who designed the archive secretly hid one encrypted copy where no one would think to look. Rachel looked at the evidence label. Her heart skipped. The recovered drive contained only 6 files. One folder. Its name consisted of a single word. Ghost. Victor Langford closed his eyes. For 15 years. He had believed every copy was gone. He had been wrong. For a long moment, no one in courtroom 3 breathed. The recovered hard drive sat on the evidence table like it carried the weight of 15 years. Agent Marcus Hale carefully broke the evidence seal. The courtroom projector flickered to life. A progress bar appeared on the screen. Decrypting archive. Silence. 25%. 43. 68. Every pair of eyes followed the slow movement across the screen. Victor Langford gripped the edge of the defense table so tightly his knuckles turned white. His attorney leaned closer. "We can still argue chain of custody." Langford barely heard him. If the archive contained what he feared, there would be no argument left to make. The progress bar reached 100%. A single folder opened. Inside were 6 files. Mission orders, communication logs, engineering reports, satellite images, medical records, mission video. Marcus looked toward Judge Whitmore. "Your Honor, these files appear untouched since the date they were archived." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Rachel Kim opened the engineering report first. The courtroom expected complicated technical language. Instead, the very first page displayed a bold warning stamped in red. "Not approved for active deployment." Rachel looked at the judge. "This contradicts every certification submitted by Aegis Strategic Systems." Marcus nodded. "It also contradicts every invoice approved by the Department of Defense." The courtroom murmured. Judge Whitmore struck the gavel. "Order." Rachel opened another file. A chain of internal emails filled the screen. Most were routine. One wasn't. Its sender was an executive vice president at Aegis. Its recipient, Victor Langford. The message read, "Delay the defect report until after procurement approval. Once deployment begins, replacing the hardware will be cheaper than delaying the contract." The courtroom erupted. Judge Whitmore slammed the gavel repeatedly. "Order." Langford shot to his feet. "That email is fabricated." Marcus calmly responded. "Our forensic team already verified the metadata." Rachel added quietly, "It was written from your office." Langford's face lost what little color remained. Sarah never looked at him. She kept staring at the bracelet around her wrist. To everyone else, the evidence exposed corruption. To her, it explained why 3 friends had never returned home. Judge Whitmore looked toward the witness stand. "Ms. Bennett." She lifted her eyes. "I need to ask you something difficult." She nodded. "Were your teammates killed because of defective communications?" Sarah remained silent for several seconds. Then she answered honestly, "No." The courtroom looked confused. Rachel frowned. "But the relay failed." "It did." "Then what killed them?" Sarah looked toward the projector. "Fear." The room fell quiet again. She continued. "When communications disappeared," she said calmly, "people stopped trusting each other." She looked at the jury. "Command believed we were dead." She looked at Marcus. "We believed Command had abandoned us." She looked toward Langford. And someone already knew exactly why. Marcus slowly opened the satellite imagery. Snow-covered mountains. Frozen coastline. Ice-covered water. Then another image. 3 emergency rescue markers. Only. There should have been 4. Marcus frowned. "Commander." Sarah smiled slightly. "You found it." "There were 4 operators." "Yes." "The reports only list 3." Sarah nodded. "Because someone erased 1." The courtroom became perfectly still. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. "Who?" Sarah answered quietly. "Me." Ethan's eyes widened. His own mother officially didn't exist? Rachel looked confused. "How is that possible?" Admiral Reeves stood. "I can answer." The judge nodded. "Go ahead." The Admiral walked slowly toward the jury box. "There is an emergency military protocol." He spoke carefully. used only under extraordinary circumstances. If an operator completes a mission so sensitive that even acknowledging their presence creates national security risks. He paused. Their identity may be removed from operational history. Rachel blinked. Completely removed? Officially. The Admiral nodded. They were never there. The courtroom struggled to absorb it. Sarah looked down. I volunteered. Everyone turned toward her. Rachel asked softly, "You volunteered to disappear?" Sarah nodded. My teammates had families. She looked toward Ethan. I had already lost my husband. She smiled sadly. My son was too young to remember any of it. She paused. So I signed. What did you sign? A lifetime agreement. Rachel whispered. To erase yourself? Sarah nodded once. If history needed someone to forget. She looked around the courtroom. I decided it could be me. Even Judge Whitmore struggled to maintain composure. During 3 decades on the bench, he had never heard anyone describe sacrificing recognition so calmly. Marcus opened another file. Medical records. The screen displayed photographs from the Arctic operation. The judge immediately ordered the gallery screens turned off. Only the court could continue viewing. The injuries were severe. Hypothermia. Broken ribs. Deep lacerations. Frostbite. Then one photograph caused Admiral Reeves to close his eyes. Sarah lay unconscious beneath emergency blankets. Wrapped tightly in both hands was the same black bracelet. Only then, it was brand new. The courtroom looked back at Sarah. She quietly explained, "It wasn't mine." Everyone froze. Rachel asked, "What do you mean?" Sarah swallowed. "It belonged to Chief Mason Doyle, the team leader." Sarah nodded. "He gave it to me before we split up." She gently touched the bracelet. "He told me." Her voice caught for the first time all day. "If I don't make it home, someone has to remember we were here." Silence. I promised him. Ethan looked away, wiping at his eyes before anyone could notice. All those years, he had thought it was just an old survival bracelet. It had actually belonged to a man who never came home. Marcus opened the final folder. Mission video. Judge Whitmore looked toward Rachel. "Can it be played publicly?" Rachel hesitated. Before she could answer, the Admiral spoke. "Your Honor, I respectfully request the courtroom be temporarily sealed." Reason? Because what these recordings contain, he looked at Sarah, has never been seen outside classified military review. The judge nodded slowly. Court security. Within minutes, courtroom doors were locked. Public feeds were disconnected. Reporters surrendered recording devices. Only essential personnel remained. The atmosphere changed completely. It no longer felt like a fraud trial. It felt like history was about to correct itself. Marcus inserted the encrypted video. The screen remained black. Then a timestamp appeared. Operation Frost Echo. March 14th, 2011. Wind roared through the courtroom speakers. A helmet camera came into focus. Snow. Ice. Darkness. Heavy breathing. Then, a voice. Calm. Focused. "Ghost, I've got movement at 12 o'clock. Sarah closed her eyes. She hadn't heard Mason Doyle's voice in 15 years. The recording continued. For the first time, the courtroom was about to witness what had really happened on the mission that had changed all of their lives. The courtroom lights dimmed. No one spoke. The only sound was the fierce Arctic wind coming from the courtroom speakers as the recovered helmet camera footage filled the projection screen. A timestamp flashed. Operation Frost Echo. March 14th, 2011, 2:17 Zulu. Snow blew across the lens so heavily that the screen was almost white. Breathing. Static. Then a calm female voice. Ghost to team leader, relay is down again. Another voice answered immediately. We'll reroute. The courtroom listened in complete silence. Everyone understood they were hearing voices from people who had died 15 years earlier. The video shook violently as the operator moved across the frozen terrain. Marcus Hale watched every frame carefully. The relay failure happened much earlier than the official report. Rachel nodded. Nearly 2 hours earlier. Sarah quietly spoke. We reported it. The courtroom turned toward her. No one answered. The recording continued. Another operator appeared briefly on screen. Chief Mason Doyle. Young. Confident. Smiling despite the blizzard. He pointed toward a frozen communications tower. If that relay doesn't come back online. He laughed. We're walking home. Several people smiled. Even in impossible conditions. The team joked. Then everything changed. The screen exploded with static. A sharp electrical crack echoed through the courtroom. The video froze. Returned. Froze again. Marcus leaned closer. Electromagnetic overload. Sarah nodded once. The new relay units couldn't handle the cold. Rachel looked toward Langford. Exactly what your engineers warned about. Langford stared silently at the floor. The footage resumed. Suddenly. Gunfire. The courtroom flinched. The operators immediately took cover. Mason's voice remained calm. Ghost move. The camera dropped behind a ridge. Heavy breathing. Snow. Confusion. Then another voice shouted. They've intercepted our frequency. Marcus paused the video. They shouldn't have known your position. Sarah answered quietly. They didn't. Everyone looked at her. They followed the emergency relay signal. Rachel slowly understood. The defective equipment. Broadcast our location. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. The very communications system meant to protect the team had revealed exactly where they were. Judge Whitmore looked directly at Victor Langford. Did your company know this defect existed? Langford remained silent. The judge repeated the question. Still nothing. His attorney stood. My client invokes his Fifth Amendment rights. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus resumed the recording. The firefight intensified. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The operators became separated. Then, Mason's voice came through again. Ghost. I'm here. I've got the package. Sarah quietly lowered her eyes. Ethan frowned. What package? No one answered. The video continued. Mason shouted over the wind. They cannot get this intelligence. Then, the explosion. The screen went completely white. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. When the picture returned, everything had changed. The camera lay sideways in the snow. Movement was slow. Painful. Sarah's breathing was ragged. Blood stained the edge of the lens. 3 voices answered the radio. Then 2. Then only 1. The courtroom became unbearably quiet. Sarah spoke before anyone else could. That was the moment. Judge Whitmore asked softly. The moment what? She never looked up. I became the only one left standing. The next several minutes of footage were almost impossible to watch. Not because of violence, but because of determination. Sarah dragged one injured teammate across the ice. Returned for another. Collapsed. Got back up. Walked again. No dramatic speeches. No music. Only relentless effort. Even after both hands were bleeding through torn gloves. She never stopped moving. Admiral Reeves wiped away a tear. I've watched this recording dozens of times. His voice cracked. It still doesn't seem possible. Then the video captured something no official report had ever mentioned. A young intelligence officer emerged from beneath collapsed ice. Barely conscious. Pinned. Sarah reached him. The man tried to push her away. Leave me. She ignored him. I have orders. You have a chance to live. She answered simply. So do you. The courtroom watched as she freed him inch by inch despite her own injuries. When he finally stood, his face became visible. The Admiral quietly covered his mouth. My son. The courtroom turned toward him. My God. His voice barely rose above a whisper. My son. Ethan looked from the screen to the Admiral, then back to his mother. She had never known. She had saved him anyway. The video continued. The young officer asked weakly, What's your name? Sarah smiled beneath layers of frost. You don't need my name. Then what do I call you? She answered with the same calm confidence she had shown in court 15 years later. Ghost. That was all. Marcus stopped the video. No one spoke. The courtroom remained perfectly still. Judge Whitmore slowly removed his glasses. I understand now. Rachel quietly nodded. So do I. But Marcus wasn't finished. There is one final file. Everyone looked toward him. It wasn't inside the archive. Where was it? He held up a sealed evidence envelope. Inside Chief Mason Doyle's personnel file. Sarah's eyes widened. That's impossible. It was overlooked during the original investigation. Marcus carefully removed a handwritten letter. The envelope carried one line. To be opened only if Ghost survives. Sarah's hands began trembling for the first time all day. Judge Whitmore asked gently, Would you like someone else to read it? She slowly shook her head. No. Marcus handed her the letter. She unfolded the yellowed paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Mason's. Her eyes filled with tears before she read a single word. Then she began. If you're reading this, you broke another impossible promise. A faint laugh escaped through tears across the courtroom. Sarah continued reading. You probably think you failed us. She stopped, closed her eyes, then forced herself onward. You didn't. The room was silent enough to hear the rain against the courthouse windows. A leader isn't the one who brings everyone home. Sarah's voice broke. A leader is the one who makes sure the mission and the people are never forgotten. She could barely continue. One day, someone will learn what really happened. She looked up. That day had finally arrived. The final line was short, simple. Exactly the kind of sentence Mason Doyle would have written. When that day comes, take the bracelet off. You earned your way home. Sarah stared at the bracelet wrapped around her wrist. For 15 years, she had believed removing it would mean breaking a promise. Instead, the promise had always been to carry it until the truth was finally known. She slowly looked toward Ethan. Their eyes met across the courtroom. For the first time since the trial began, he didn't see a quiet cybersecurity consultant. He saw the woman who had carried the weight of 3 fallen teammates, a classified mission, and 15 years of silence, all without asking for recognition. As Sarah's fingers rested on the clasp of the worn black bracelet, the courtroom held its breath. The courtroom was so quiet that the soft click of Sarah Bennett's bracelet clasp echoed through the room. For 15 years, she had never removed it. Not while sleeping. Not during surgery after a training accident. Not during her husband's funeral. Not while raising Ethan alone. Not once. Her fingers rested on the worn black paracord. She closed her eyes. Then she remembered Mason Doyle's final words. When that day comes, take the bracelet off. You earned your way home. Slowly, almost reverently, she released the clasp. The bracelet slipped into her palm. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She wasn't crying because she had taken it off. She was crying because, for the first time in 15 years, she no longer had to carry the burden alone. No one in the courtroom moved. Judge Harold Whitmore quietly stood from the bench. It wasn't protocol. Federal judges did not normally stand for witnesses. But protocol had stopped matching hours ago. Without saying a word, he bowed his head towards Sarah. One by one, everyone else followed. Jurors, court staff, federal marshals, NCIS agents, reporters, even opposing attorneys. An entire courtroom stood in silent respect. Victor Langford remained seated. His attorney whispered urgently, "Stand." Langford didn't move. For the first time in his life, power couldn't protect him. Money couldn't protect him. Influence couldn't protect him. Only the truth remained. Judge Whitmore slowly returned to the bench. The court has reached its findings. Every reporter lifted a pen. Every camera operator leaned forward. The judge spoke deliberately. This court finds overwhelming evidence that military communication defects were knowingly concealed during the procurement process. He looked directly at Langford. The evidence further establishes deliberate alteration of official records. Another pause. An intentional obstruction of federal investigations. Langford closed his eyes. The judge continued. I hereby order all related evidence transferred immediately to the Department of Justice. He struck the gavel once. Mr. Langford. His voice became firm. You are remanded into federal custody, pending indictment. Before anyone reacted, federal marshals stepped forward. Victor Langford. One marshal gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Please stand. This time, he had no choice. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The same wrists that had signed reports claiming dangerous equipment was safe. As he was escorted toward the courtroom doors, he stopped beside Sarah. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, he whispered, I ruined hundreds of lives. Sarah looked at him calmly. No. He frowned. You did. She shook her head. You chose to. Then she turned away. Those were the last words she ever spoke to Victor Langford. Outside the courthouse, news helicopters circled overhead. Breaking news alerts spread across the country. Classified Navy mission revealed. Federal fraud exposed. Unknown SEAL operator identified after 15 years. But inside the courtroom, none of that mattered anymore. Admiral Jonathan Reeves slowly approached Sarah. His hands trembled slightly with age. He stopped only a few feet away. I've imagined this moment for 15 years. Sarah smiled gently. I wish we'd met under better circumstances. So do I. The Admiral reached into the inside pocket of his dress uniform. He removed a small velvet box. I've carried this since 2012. Sarah looked confused. What is it? I hoped one day I'd find the person it belonged to. He opened the box. Inside rested a Navy cross. The metal shimmered beneath the courtroom lights. Sarah immediately stepped back. No. The Admiral looked surprised. It was approved for you. She quietly shook her head. No. You earned it. No. The Admiral smiled knowingly. Mason Doyle would have argued with you. A faint laugh escaped Sarah. Yes. He probably would have ordered you to accept it. He definitely would have. The Admiral gently closed the box. Then allow me to say what he no longer can. He came to attention, raised his hand in one final salute. Welcome home, Ghost. This time, Sarah returned the salute with tears openly running down her face. Ethan slowly walked down from the public gallery. For a moment, he simply stood there, looking at his mother, looking at the woman he thought he knew. He remembered every birthday she had quietly skipped because military memories became too heavy. Every sleepless night, every thunderstorm that made her stare silently through the window. Every morning she still packed his lunch. Every soccer game she never missed. He suddenly understood. She hadn't been distant because she didn't love him. She had been carrying ghosts no child should ever inherit. He stepped forward. Without saying a word, he wrapped his arms around her. Sarah hugged him tightly. "I'm sorry." Ethan looked confused. "For what?" "For never telling you." He smiled through tears. "You didn't know me stories." She looked into his eyes. "I owed you the truth." He gently picked up the bracelet resting in her hand. "This," he whispered, "belongs to all of you." Sarah nodded. "Yes." He carefully fastened it back around her wrist. "You should keep wearing it." She smiled softly. "Why?" "Because now." He squeezed her hand. "People know what it means." 6 months later. Norfolk Naval Station. The morning sky was brilliantly clear. Hundreds of service members stood in perfect formation overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. Families filled the front rows. 3 empty chairs displayed folded American flags. Above them hung photographs of Chief Mason Doyle, Petty Officer Lucas Grant, and intelligence specialist Daniel Brooks. For the first time in history, their mission had been officially declassified. Their names had been officially cleared. Their families finally knew how they died. Not because equipment failed, not because leadership abandoned them, but because they chose to protect others until their very last breath. Admiral Reeves stepped to the podium. His voice carried across the waterfront. Some heroes become famous. He looked toward Sarah. Others spend their lives hoping no one ever learns their names. A long pause. Today, he smiled. We honor both. The audience rose together. 3 bronze stars. 3 purple hearts. 3 long overdue recognitions. Each accepted by grieving families who had waited 15 years for answers. Finally, the master of ceremonies spoke once more. There remains one final presentation. Sarah quietly shook her head. She hadn't agreed to this. The Admiral smiled. This one isn't optional. Laughter gently rippled through the crowd. He opened the velvet box again. The President of the United States has authorized the presentation of the Navy Cross. He looked directly at Sarah. To Commander Sarah Bennett. The entire crowd erupted into applause. Sarah walked slowly to the stage. She accepted the medal with both hands, then leaned toward the microphone. Everyone expected a speech. Instead, she said only one sentence. This medal belongs to everyone who never came home. She stepped away. The applause became even louder. 1 year later, life became quiet again, exactly how Sarah preferred it. She continued working as a cybersecurity consultant. She coached Ethan's robotics team on weekends. They laughed more, talked more, shared memories instead of hiding them. Sometimes, on Saturday mornings, they visited the memorial overlooking the bay. They always brought fresh flowers, not because they had to, because family visits family. One autumn afternoon, Ethan asked a question. "Mom." "Yeah." "If nobody had found that notebook." She smiled. "I would have been okay." "You really would have stayed silent forever?" Sarah looked toward the ocean. "I didn't need people to know I was there." She paused. "I just needed the truth to survive." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. After a long silence, he smiled. "I think Dad would have been proud." Sarah looked up at the sky. "So do I." As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the water, A gentle breeze stirred the black paracord bracelet around Sarah's wrist. It was no longer a burden, no longer a secret, no longer a symbol of unfinished promises. It had become something far greater, a reminder that courage isn't measured by the medals displayed on a uniform. It is measured by the promises we keep, the lives we protect, and the truth we defend, even when no one is watching. And somewhere beyond the waves, in the quiet peace she had spent 15 years searching for, Sarah finally felt what Mason Doyle had wished for her all along. She was home.